approximately 67% of the trade potential within the region has not been exploited. Now, it's been quite a few years since the research was done in 2014. We would love to see what data or what the current data says. Regional connectivity has always been crucial, especially for this region, South Asia, as well. And in this business session 2 at Nepal Infrastructure Summit, we shall be discussing about regional connectivity for economic growth. I would like to request our chair to kindly join us on stage. Honorable Mr. Jeevan Ram Shrestha, Minister for Culture, Tourism and Civil Aviation, Government of Nepal. Can we please put our hands together for our chair, Honorable Mr. Jeevan Ram Shrestha. We'd also like to invite our keynote speaker, Mr. Rajat Nag, Member, Board of Directors at Partnership for Transparency, Delhi, India. He's also a Senior Fellow at the Emerging Markets Forum, Washington, D.C., formerly the Managing Director General of the Asian Development Bank, in which he also held many important portfolios. Thank you very much, Mr. Rajat Nag, for being a part of Nepal Infrastructure Summit 2022. I'd also like to invite on stage our another keynote speaker, Ms. Cecile Fruman, Director, Regional Integration and Engagement, South Asia, World Bank. She's responsible for fostering collaborative activity amongst South Asian countries and managing partnerships and engagements in this region as well. With our chair and keynotes, it is now time to invite our panelists for this session. I'd like to invite on stage Dr. Phayam Hee Ng, Director of Regional Cooperation Coordination Division for South Asia, ADB. Thank you very much, sir, for being a part of this event. He has done extensive research on regional cooperation, economic development, and financial markets while working at ADB. And prior joining to ADB, he worked at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization and Central Bank of Malaysia. I also have the pleasure now of inviting on stage Mr. Kulman Gising, Managing Director at NEA, Nepal Electricity Authority. We'd also like to invite on stage Mr. Khagabahadur Bisht, Executive Director at Millennium Challenge Account Nepal, MCAN. He also brings more than 25 years of experience in infrastructure and power sector. He's also the former president and a founding member of IPPAN. I'd like to welcome another dynamic lady on stage, Ms. Nandini Thapa, Senior Director at Nepal Tourism Board, who has a huge contribution in the tourism sector of Nepal, having worked in this sector for over 2 decades. I'd also like to invite on stage Mr. Gyanendra Lal Pradhan, Convener, Energy Council, CNI. He is a hydro entrepreneur, the Executive Chairman at Hydro Solutions, and Executive Member of Nepal-Britain Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Senator at Kathmandu University. Now, the person who brings it all together, I'd like to invite our moderator for this session on stage, Mr. Ramkrishna Khatiwada, CEO, Nepal Infrastructure Bank Limited. He's also had an elaborate career working with both the public and private sector in the domain of infrastructure development. So before our panelists start, before our moderators start, I think we could pass on some energy to all of them with a big round of applause. And I would now like to hand over the proceedings of this session to our moderator.
Hello. Yes, thank you. Good morning and namaste. Thank you, organizer, for having me and giving opportunity to moderate a session on regional connectivity for economic growth. It is indeed a pleasure in moderating a session with this wonderful and esteemed panelists and personalities. So, after hearing the bigger picture of the infrastructure in the previous session, now we are moving to the sub-component of the broader infrastructure, which is connectivity. Connectivity refers to all the basic amenities which connect to people, then trade, infrastructure, and also the whole gamut of the tourism, energy, and most importantly, people-to-people connectivity. So in this session, we'll be discussing on the regional connectivity for the economic growth, Regional connectivity is regarded as the level of and effectiveness of regional network, facilitating flow of the goods, tourism, society, and the knowledge. South Asia being connected or integrated is socially, ecologically, and historically face many challenges. So South Asia being the home of 25% of all population, but we do have a trade of only 5%, and even investment flow is very minimal. In fact, it is in the decimal of the 0.6%. So in this context, I'll be requesting our esteemed guest, Mr. Rajat Nag, to deliver a keynote speak. Then we'll move forward to the special remarks and go to the panelists. And we do have the panelist session of 2 questions, and then move on to our Honorable Minister for closing remarks and the wrap of the session. So I'd like to request Mr. Rajat Nag to deliver your keynote speak. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Madam MC, Mr. Moderator, co-panelists, friends, namaste. First of all, let me say that it's a great pleasure to be back home. Nepal was and is my home, and I'm glad to be back. I'm also very glad to see on the same panel on regional cooperation World Bank and ADB. That's great. I mean, you guys have a tremendous amount of work to do in helping all our countries in this great effort. My warmest thanks to CNI for inviting me on this very important summit. And a very special thanks to my dear friend, Dr. Bindu Lohani. He and I have been partners in crime for the last 30 years or more on this very exciting journey of regional cooperation. So Bindu, thank you very much, and great to be here. Tragically, as the moderator was implying, South Asia, a region which was very highly integrated only about 75 years back, is now one of the least integrated regions in the world. And the intra-regional trade in South Asia is actually less than 5% of the total regional trade. And compared that to East Asia, which is 55%. So those two numbers for me just tell this story. And if you actually want to see that story unfold, I would urge you, as I'm sure many of you have done, visit the border crossing between India and Bangladesh at Petropol and Benapol. I have been there. Oops, there goes my speech. I've been there, and I was shocked, actually, that truck drivers on both sides actually spend days crossing that, including transshipment, when even in East Africa, and I say even because, generally people sort of think that things would be slow there, it takes at most 6 hours. Literally, hundreds of trucks are piled up on either side. Now, in Nepal, I'm glad to say that the situation has improved over time because of recent infrastructure investments. And at the Birganj-Raxaul border with India, the time required is now much less. But, and I'm told that the times have reduced almost by 50%. But of course, there is still much more to do. Now, one recognizes the complex geography of the region, Bhutan and Nepal being landlocked countries, difficult connectivity, India connected with the northeastern states through a very narrow Siliguri Chickens corridor. But still, we have a huge problem of lack of integration. And it is therefore not surprising, though sad, that it is sometimes easier and cheaper for businesses to transact with Germany or even farther away than their immediate neighbors. And according to some estimates prepared by the World Bank, I think there's something which says that it's 15 to 20% cheaper for Indian companies to trade with Brazil or Germany than with Bangladesh. And these are all well known to you, but I think it's good to remind ourselves that given all the potential, how far we really still have to travel. And therefore, it is no surprise that the regional trade has barely scratched the surface of its potential. And Madam MC had referred to the underachievement, 67% you noted correctly. But I'm afraid I do not have much more positive news to give. One can always say we've improved, and yes, we have, there's no question, but a long, long way to go. So let's just look at some of the things that we need to do to move ahead. Obviously, bridging the infrastructure gap, we've already heard about it this morning. There is a very active, dynamic sub-regional cooperation program called SASEC, and that is making progress. But on the infrastructure front, I think a very fundamental priority really has to be on the multimodal transport. You know, we do have, even within nations, multimodal transport, multimodal freight operations are limited. And as you can imagine, it is even more or less at a regional perspective. And therefore, we need a much stronger interconnectivity between rails and roads and inland waterways, which will need to be upgraded. Roads, just for a moment, and again, this morning we talked about the importance. We have sessions, and my panelists, I'm sure, will refer to it. Roads carry 70% of the freight in the region. And most of them, not all of them, most of them are crowded two-lane thoroughfares. Trucks, which are capable of traveling at 70 or 100, travel at 30 kilometers per hour. And quite frankly, some sections are incapable of carrying larger vehicles. Therefore, the last mile connectivity in many places is still lacking. And I'll keep repeating our deficiencies, as I'm sure our co-panelists will, but I want to make it in perspective, as in the first session we heard. We can look back and say tremendous progress has been made in this entire region, no question about it. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to look at the problems in a spirit of honesty and as friends and think about the way forward. So I just put that qualifier. Now, a further mismatch is really, at a regional sense, the mismatch in the handling capacity between the various checkposts. And my figures can be a bit dated, but when I was visiting last, and my last talk with people at the border, India's Petropol border can handle up to 750 trucks a day. On the Bangladesh side is only 350, or 370 to be more precise. So, you know, you've got physical infrastructure constraints. Let me spend a minute on waterways, because again, that was really the livelihood connectivity of the region. And the oldest means of transport in the region really was the Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna waterways. And there was a dense lattice of waterways covering almost about 70% of the goods and services and people within the region. And now it's 2%. So again, the tragedy is a region which was very well connected, infrastructure-wise, trade-wise, has deteriorated very sharply. And our challenge is essentially just to restore it. And of course, very positively, India and Bangladesh are now talking about the eastern waterways grid to connect up many of the existing waterways. And this will be of tremendous benefit, really, to India, obviously to have connectivity with its northeastern part and Calcutta. A trip of about 1,600 kilometers around the chicken's neck would be reduced to barely, in the low hundreds. And then time savings and the economic savings will be tremendous. Of course, it's a win-win situation. India will gain because of this easy access. Bangladesh will gain because of the revenues it can earn. And landlocked Bhutan and Nepal also are working on it. And I would urge that when we think of connectivity and we think of transport, we don't think only of roads, important as they are. We think of other modes, and waterways, I think, is a very natural one to focus on. Now, hardware is always important. You need to build the roads, you need to build the waterways, etc. But, and this but is a very important one, I believe is the software which actually makes the difference. And again, this morning there were important references to it. Red tape. The simpler regulations would make so much difference. A case in point, and again, I know I'm speaking to a group who knows it all, but still, just to put in perspective, trade between India and Bangladesh, around 22 documents and 55 signatures are needed. And my numbers, if anything, I think may be a bit on the lower side, according to people I've spoken to in the border. And when I mentioned some of this figure, they said, "Saab, kya baat karte ho?" There are many more happen. Bhutan, which I always thought was much more advanced, needs on an average documents going to 86 authorities for imports, and exporters need to do so 74 times. My point is not on the numbers. My point is to say that these are creating thick borders, and with a stroke of a pen and then implementation, you can reduce it. You don't need to build infrastructure, so it's not always money, as we heard this morning. Cutting down the physical inspection of goods. And again, we talk about freer trade, we talk about SAFTA, and all of these are very important. But in practice, the mindset is really a thick border, barrier behind borders. And if a customs officer inspects all the things that comes, obviously delays, and therefore adoption of advanced risk management practices and consignments could be clear. And there is technology available, there are models available, but that has to be implied. The early implementation of the BBIN motor vehicle agreement, again, I couldn't emphasize more. The talk started, if I remember correctly, in 2015, 7 years back. Bhutan has dropped out for domestic political reasons. But the other three, Bangladesh, India, and Nepal, in spite of all intentions, the MOU was inked 2 years back, and of course I know COVID came in the way, but it's still not implemented. I checked as of yesterday, 4 o'clock at least, it was not implemented because the passengers and cargo protocols have not yet been negotiated. We talked about digitization and automation, and obviously that makes a big difference. Now, one thing that I should emphasize, something that Bindu and I have emphasized always, and I'm sure my colleagues do, is that while we talk about greater integration of South Asia, we are not talking, and I hope we will not talk, about a fortress South Asia. We're talking about open regionalism. It's not that we'll close ourselves to the rest of the world, because otherwise then the whole benefits are gone. And an excellent study done by the World Bank, actually, I think it was called Glass Half Full, that you referred to a little while back, that showed that if South Asia had not created these artificial barriers that I've talked about, some of it physical, some of it in a process, some of it institutional, we could be trading 3 times more than we do now, 3 times. And this is what is true for the region, is true for the individual countries, and some of the figures are quite staggering. Sri Lanka and Bangladesh could more than double their trade interregionally. India could triple, Nepal could quadruple, and Pakistan could grow by 8 times. So that is the sort of potential that we are losing by this lack of connectivity. And I again emphasize it's not just the physical connectivity, it is the connectivity of processes, the software, and the mindset. And what pains me personally, and I'm sure it pains you, is that every time I've gone to any of these countries, and I've been to all of them many times, there is a great connectivity of mind. There is, really. But somewhere along the line, that connectivity doesn't get translated into action. And that's what I think we'll have to look at. Now, we've just talked about South Asia, but that won't be enough. If we are not going to be Fortress South Asia, the next thing we must do is think of the Southeast Asia. And that's a population of another about 700 million people. And again, tremendous potential if South Asia and Southeast Asia were to have more integration. There is talk, there is progress, but not enough. And some estimates, and again, by excellent study by the World Bank that I have seen, that South Asia GDP, if there was greater integration, could increase by as much as 11%. And Southeast Asia would also benefit, but not as much, but South Asia, 11%. So, huge potential, and of course, reasons for why Southeast Asia and Southeast Asia are not as integrated, very similar to why South Asia is not. High tariffs. By comparison, South Asian tariffs on imports from Southeast Asia are nearly 3 times, 8.9% compared to the other way around. So South Asia is imposing higher tariffs, which naturally has to be looked at. But more importantly, same things as I mentioned before, restrictive non-tariff barriers, sanitary and phytosanitary standards, inspections, process delays, and those are the things which really still is, I think, a major issues. On the other hand, I think Southeast Asia, and I mention this whenever I speak to my colleagues and friends there, Southeast Asia has to recognize that South Asia, particularly India, has a comparative advantage in services. So they can't ask us to be more liberal on imports of goods, but somehow restrict on services. But anyways, it's a mutual benefit to all. And we can't just talk of South Asia and Southeast Asia without thinking of our neighbors in the north. So we have to think of China, we have to include China, again for a very simple reason. Here you are, India and China, the world's 2 largest population-wise. India and China will switch places very soon. And China is already the world's largest economy in PPP terms and in nominal terms within the next decade. India is the 6th largest economy at the moment and would be in the next 10 years 3rd and certainly 4th, if not 3rd, exceeding Germany. So here you are, these 2 large countries, and a population of South Asia which is close to about 2 billion. You've got 1.4 billion in China, and then, as I said, 700 million in Southeast Asia. Total of 4 billion people, market of 4 billion people. We cannot think of jigsaw pieces in independence. So therefore, China, India, and SASEC, and BIMSTEC, which obviously is a key element of South Asia, comes in. Now, I recognize that there are geopolitical considerations, and has to be. Nepal, for example, finds itself in that strategic location, and you've got 2 large neighbors. But to me, that is no reason at all why it cannot and should not be considered, and considered fruitfully and productively. But let me, I know that Mr. Moderator is going to now warn me about the time, so I'm going to skip a bit on the financing. In any case, my colleagues this morning covered it in great detail. Let me just very briefly go into what I call the challenges. Now, we know all this. There is nothing that I have told you which is news. And then why are we still in this situation? And I say this with all sincerity. I think it's really that we, those who believe in regional cooperation, particularly those analysts and academics, we made a fundamental assumption that the regional cooperation is a win-win proposition. There's no doubt about it. But there is asymmetry of benefits and costs. Not everybody is going to win the same. Not everybody is going to benefit the same. There will be some who will benefit more. There will be some who will bear the cost. But the costs are borne by a few in the border, let's say. Livelihoods are affected. And the benefits is more diffuse for the whole country. We had assumed that the beneficiaries will compensate the losers, be it countrywide, between countries, or within countries. That assumption is so critical, and yet we did not think much about how will this compensation take place? How will the losers be compensated by the winners? How will the people who lose their livelihoods because of regional cooperation, be it the steel mill workers, or be it the garment workers, or be it others? One of the reasons the border crossings are thick is, we euphemistically say, poor governance and disgovernance. Corruption is a major issue. But it is also because there are vested interests of livelihoods. And we have to therefore recognize that issue. And that's the whole question of political will. And I don't think we should just say politics. I think we should understand that there's a genuine concern, and we need to address that. That's number one. Number two, I personally think that security is enhanced when you've got regional cooperation. If I'm vested in you and you're vested in me, we'll think twice before we fight against each other. So when national security considerations are put in as an argument against regional connectivity, I don't dilute that, I don't diminish that, but I think this is where there should be greater regional connectivity rather than less. There are talks about if you get regional connectivity, you get human trafficking, you get environmental degradation, you get transmission of diseases, all true, but those are no reason to close the borders. That is actually greater reason to monitor it better. Human trafficking is obviously a major concern, but that is only requires more and closer monitoring. So to conclude, I think the benefits of regional cooperation is several times more than the costs, but we have to recognize that there are costs. It's not a zero-sum game, but there are losses, there are losers, and there are gainers who have to be recognized. The second one is that our destinies are shared. We shared that 4 billion people who sort of can come together. And the shared prosperity, and we've seen numbers, and the studies done by ADB and the World Bank prove beyond doubt that the infrastructure is good for economic growth, equity, regional connectivity even more so. So let me end by saying that more than 100 years back, a South Asian poet who was obviously a strong internationalist and believed in regional cooperation before the words were even coined, Tagore, said, "You shall give and you shall take." I'm making a poor translation of his Bengali. You shall give and you shall take. You will integrate and you will be integrated. And if somebody could say this 100 years back, then we, certainly all of us together, can live up to that expectation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nag. So this is important that physical infrastructure should be synchronous with the different other software infrastructure or software connectivity, like digital integration of the digital proper policy and the mechanism. So in this regard, World Bank is working as a theme of One South Asia. So we'll hear from World Bank, and I'd like to request Ms. Cecile to deliver your special remarks, and I'd like to request you to conclude in 10 minutes.
Will do. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in Kathmandu, and I want to thank Rajat Nath, because I think he's set this up very nicely for me, and actually he's covered a lot of what I wanted to also cover, so you'll be happy to know that I'll stay to time. Also by citing a lot of our work, because we do work very much in this space at the World Bank, and we do it in partnership with the ADB, and I also congratulate the fact that we're up here together today, because this is a partnership, and I always say that regional integration is hard work, and it requires all hands on deck. The more we come together and congregate on this important topic, the more successful we can be. So I'd like to congratulate and thank CNI for inviting me today and for putting on this very important event, and to all of the other organizers and partners. So what I'd like to do today is tell you a little bit about what the World Bank is doing in this space. As you've heard, we do a lot of analytical work. We do work that helps to provide evidence on the benefits of regional cooperation, and that's been very well laid out, and I won't cover very much of that because the evidence is compelling. All of the simulations that we run, be it on trade or electricity trade, climate change cooperation, the benefits are absolutely staggering. So we do this from a place of conviction. We know that this is good for growth, it's good for development, and it's good for shared prosperity and inclusivity. So I'll be talking a little bit about what we do, and I'll touch on 4 topics in particular. So how we engage on this topic, we've been at it for 12 years, 12 years of dedicated effort, and we do it with 3 types of instruments. The first is the analytical work that we've heard of and I've just mentioned. We also work on the how-to. Once we've built this compelling case, how do we then actually support different countries and actors in implementing this? And as we've heard, you know, the devil's in the details. There's a lot of paperwork, red tape, various activities that need to be undertaken. We also have a number of convening platforms. This is an area where bringing stakeholders from the various countries in South Asia is very important on technical topics like hydromet, or on more political topics that require buy-in at a track 1 level. And then obviously we have financing. We are a bank. We have financing instruments that allow us to have a vibrant portfolio of activities. We operate with 3 Ps. The first is that we are pragmatic. In this region, it is difficult to work with all 8 SAARC countries, but we can get a lot done at the sub-regional level. And that's why I'm here in Nepal this week, and I'm spending 10 days here, because our area of focus today is very much BBIN. It's Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal. This is where there's most traction. This is where the geopolitics are generally quite favorable, and where there are real economic win-wins, where the countries have a lot to benefit from working together. So we take a pragmatic approach. We are very patient in this effort because it requires time. We are trying to reverse, as we just heard, you know, sort of 75, 100 years of history, and to put things on a different course. So it's a very patient approach, and then one where we also need to be very, very perseverant and not give up and stick to it. So as Nepal and other countries of the region prepare to the recovery post-COVID, we think that there's a very, very compelling case for building back better, greener, and more connected. So I'd like now to focus on the 4 key areas where we do work. This is not all of the work we do, but I think these are the most relevant to our conversation today. So we've just heard a lot about transport and trade, and I'll add just a few figures to the conversation. So for Nepal, cross-border trade is absolutely critical, for the simple reason that 95% of Nepal's trade is currently via land, and 60% is either with India or routed through India. So border crossings are absolutely essential, and I had the benefit of visiting the Birgunj border crossing last week, and I was able to witness how trucks flow or don't flow, right? So Indian trucks can enter the Nepali market, but Nepali trucks cannot enter India. And that's an issue that hopefully will be tackled with the motor vehicle agreement. Why does trade matter so much for Nepal? Because trade in goods accounts for 40% of Nepal's GDP. So this is a huge share of your GDP. And we know that a 40% reduction in trade costs could yield welfare gains of 56% to GDP and intra-regional export gains of 106%. So these simple measures that Rajat was mentioning, you know, reducing red tape, opening borders, letting trucks flow freely, having more bilateral, trilateral, or quadrilateral agreements can have incredible, incredible impact on the economy of Nepal. So what are we doing? Well, we're working a lot in the space that was described earlier. We are working on road infrastructure because, as we heard, most of the freight currently is carried by road. So we're investing in roads, and that's something we do very closely with the ADB. So for instance, on the East-West Highway, which I also got to visit last week, working at the border on border infrastructure, multimodal, we heard about, inland waterways, railway, aviation, and connecting all of these to have a more viable solution. And then, as we heard, also reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers, reducing the dwell time at the trade gateways. And then obviously a new agenda, which is incredibly important in the trade space, which is about supporting digital systems for trade, modernizing, digitizing, and getting greater efficiency gains. And then this BBIN MVA we've spoken about, we think can be a real game changer. We're very hopeful that now the protocols for cargo and passenger can be adopted and that there will be significant gains for the country and the industry. And I'd like just to mention one of our new projects. So this is a program that we call the Accelerating Transport and Trade Connectivity in Eastern South Asia, ACCESS. It's a $1.2 billion program that currently covers Nepal and Bangladesh. We're going to open it up to Bhutan, and India is very much part of the conversation. And this is all about this agenda, all about making transport more reliable, more efficient, and having greater efficiency at the borders. So the second topic where we are working very actively here in Nepal and in the sub-region is on electricity. Here again, there are some real deficiencies. 250 million people in South Asia still live without access to electricity, and that's about a quarter of the global unserved population. So a real issue still around access. We know also that power shortages and inefficiencies cost the region significantly in the range of 4 to 7% of total GDP. The good news, however, is that regional cooperation could expand hydropower and clean energy capacity threefold by 2040, from 64 gigawatts in 2015 to an estimated 170 gigawatts by 2040. And Nepal is one of the key stakeholders in this conversation, has enormous potential because of your hydropower capability and the fact that so little of it is currently exploited. So you can be a real game changer in this agenda. So once you've built the hydro, then you need to be able to trade that capacity. And we've also estimated the benefits of unrestricted cross-border electricity trade in South Asia between 2015 and 2040 to be about $226 billion. That's about $9 billion a year. And it's starting to happen. So last week I also had the benefit of visiting the Dalkabar substation, where the power is actually now flowing between India and Nepal. That's been since April 2021, where the exchange is now being done in the day-ahead market, and I actually saw in the control room the power flowing. And I have to say it was a great moment for me, because this is something that we at the World Bank have been supporting for quite some time, and it's taken many years to materialize, but it's incredibly exciting. And it opens up space now for more bilateral trade between Nepal and India, but also now to really interconnect the BBIN and maybe BBIN-S with Sri Lanka one day, or even just a real power pool for the whole region. So that's incredibly exciting for us. So what are we doing? We're investing in hydro here in Nepal. We're supporting this cross-border electricity market. And we're also, convening the stakeholders, bringing the analytics to the table. So third topic, how am I doing? Do I need to accelerate? Okay. 2 more, but I'll be very quick. Third topic, digital development. So it's not, as we heard, it's not only about hard infrastructure, it's all about also some of the soft infrastructure. And here again, this is a region that is lagging. This is a region that has the largest internet usage gap globally, and we heard Swarnim actually using some of this data earlier. So 61% of South Asians live within the range of a telecom network, but do not use the internet. Nearly 20% of the global unbanked adults are in South Asia. And here in Nepal, one of the key constraints is the very high cost of the internet. It's about 50% higher than it would be in India. So this is a big challenge, and again, here we do have some solutions, and we're engaged on this agenda. So here in Nepal, we've just approved a new project, the Digital Nepal Acceleration Project, which is helping with a number of things. One is to reduce the cost of connectivity through an innovative bulk procurement approach, and then to help create a vibrant market for data, a regulated market for data, and then to build an ecosystem that is going to favor digital inclusion and innovation throughout the economy. At the sub-regional level or the regional level, we're also looking at some of the cross-border issues. So for instance, how do you regulate and how do you enable data sharing across borders? How do you ensure that India, Nepal, and other countries can collaborate in the space of e-health or e-education by sharing data in a way that is regulated, that also ensures privacy, but then allows people to reap the benefit from the data. And then a big, big issue is cross-border payments. Today, these cross-border payments are very restrictive. It doesn't favor e-commerce. It doesn't favor the ability to move money and goods across the border. Lastly, I'd like to mention climate change. So you might, and climate cooperation. You might wonder why I'm bringing this up. It's not a sector in infrastructure, and yet, as we heard earlier, climate really permeates everything. And if we're going to build infrastructure today, like we did 10 years ago, 20 years, 30 years ago, we're probably going to make some very, very costly mistakes. Because as we heard, the forecasting and the codes that we've used in the past will not sustain the effects of the future. Nepal is one of the most affected countries in the world. It ranks 10th most affected country in the world according to the Climate Risk Index. 80% of the population of Nepal is at risk from a natural or climate-induced hazard. And most of these people are the most vulnerable and the poor people. Therefore, it is our imperative as we plan for infrastructure that we take into account these new risks. And this is an area also where regional cooperation is deeply needed. Climate events know no borders, be they floods, be they cyclones, be they droughts, be it plastic pollution or air quality. These are shared airsheds, these are shared rivers, and this is a shared climate. Therefore, regional cooperation is absolutely essential. A country like Nepal in particular that has a smaller economy and less resources does not have the capability to have a full-fledged hydromet service, for instance. It can benefit greatly by working with India, with its other neighbors, to pool resources, to pool data, to pool capabilities. So in this space, we are supporting a South Asia Hydromet Forum. We bring together hydromet agencies, also the National Disaster Risk and Recovery agencies. We work on better forecasting, better modeling, and then also better early warning services. And this can really help to save lives and save livelihoods. And I mentioned transboundary water management, air quality, plastic pollution, and then really building more resilient infrastructure. So again, areas where the region has a great amount to gain by working together. So finally, just to conclude that in everything we do, we look very closely at the role of women, be it women in trade, women as contributors, users, beneficiaries of these services, and ensuring that all of the gains, often the women are the most vulnerable. They are on the receiving end of these climate events, that they are well protected and that their voice is heard in planning this infrastructure. We work very closely with the private sector, with other financiers such as ADB. I'd like just to say a word on the grid approach. Many of you may have heard of this. Everything we do in the regional space is fully aligned with the approach here in Nepal on grid. So grid is our green, resilient, and inclusive development approach. It's a concept that we developed in response to COVID as a way of building back better. And I understand that it's now been very much adopted here in Nepal through the Kathmandu Declaration that was signed in September 2021. This is about having an economic planning that is fully recognizes the importance of sustainable development, inclusive development. And in the Kathmandu Declaration, they've identified 4.2 billion in potential future support in addition to the 3.2 billion in previously committed resources. So this is a large agenda, and our regional agenda contributes to this. So I'll conclude there, and just to reiterate again how important this agenda is for the World Bank. We're very committed to this. We take it very seriously because we know the benefits. We're also aware that this is a long-term agenda, but there are also some very short-term gains that can be had if we can work together in the development community and with the countries of South Asia. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Cecil. So obviously you have rightly pointed out that the climate change is creating a serious issue, and we have to go on a sustainable infrastructure and resilience infrastructure. So now moving on, I'll be starting the panel discussion, taking note from our keynote speaker as well as special remark speaker. First, I'd like to move on to ADB, because ADB also has been working on the regional connectivity with focusing on the energy, trade, investment, and digital connectivity. There are many problems of the increased cost of trade, poorer logistic infrastructure, and basically poor level of the cargo handling, congested port and the road, and many more, which need immediate attention. So I am referring the World Bank report, and even Mr. Rajat Nag already pointed out that which says it is about 15 to 20% cheaper for an Indian company to trade with Brazil or Germany than with the South Asian countries. So this is a kind of the very much challenging situation. In this context, how do you see Nepal current situation in regional connectivity? Which sector are promising for the economic growth? This is one question, and I'll also asking two questions each panelist, and the request each panelist to conclude in the 5 to 7 minutes because we have a very limited time. So the second question is, for getting benefited from the regional connectivity, what policy and the regulatory measures need to be implemented by the government to promote regional connectivity? Over to you.
First of all, of course, very grateful to CNI for inviting me to be a panelist at this event. And thank you all for coming. I see very well attended. And so I think given the time limit, I'll go straight to the questions. And I think one thing that ADB has been doing a lot for the region has been through our work for SASEC, the South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation Program. That was started way back in 2001 and is continuing, and it's been things been doing very well. So over those time, we have about $17 billion worth of project, of which about 10 billion has been funded by ADB. The others is from other partners. So when we do the work in SASEC, we're not just trying to do lend the money ourselves. We also try to mobilize funding from other sources. Now you may ask, what has SASEC done for Nepal? In Nepal, we have about 3 billion worth of projects, of which ADB financed about 2 billion itself. Our project in Nepal actually is roughly divided between energy projects and transport projects, basically mostly roads. Now, what are the priorities for SASAC? I think the priority for SASAC actually reflect very much the challenges that we have in the region, and that was sort of highlighted by our moderator. So the priority of SASAC, where we want to focus our attention on, first, of course, is transport. The region definitely needs a lot more transportation infrastructure. Second, we work on energy, which is, of course, another major challenge that we see here in the region. Third, trade facilitation, right? So we all have been highlighted that physical infrastructure may be there, but if there are red tapes, there are congestion, there are delays in the border due to excessive procedures, they can slow down even the best infrastructure. So we want, and we have been working very hard on this trade facilitation part. The last part is actually on economic corridor development. So that's basically a lot of work that has been in India, where they are building a corridor along the east coast. And finally, actually, I can highlight that, the world has been changing, and there's a lot of new priorities coming in as well. And so therefore, this year, we have included a new priority for SASAC. And that new priority is climate, disaster, and pandemic resilience. Because we know these are the big challenge. We just went through COVID-19. We see disasters affecting the region, and of course, the overarching impact of climate change. So this will mean that, SASAC, we are sort of adjusting and adapting to all these sort of new challenges. So now, in terms of what are the new priority sectors that we think that are important for Nepal? I note that we have somebody from the Nepal Energy Agency. Right here we have somebody from tourism. So I would say actually, it's actually renewable energy, tourism, and also manufacturing, right? So renewable energy, I think, is clear. There's tremendous demand from India and Bangladesh for renewable energy. Bhutan definitely has a lot of hydroelectric potential. So how can ADB support this? Support via basically transmission line, right? So after you generate electricity, you need to have the transmission to sort of the transmission infrastructure, because the difference between renewable energy and traditional energy is that the renewable energy sources are usually far away from where the energy is consumed. So we need the transmission line to bring the energy there. And ADB, we have been working in that for a long time. Actually, that's the history of our energy investment in Nepal. And the other thing is we also been working on identifying the grid, right? So we're doing studies on what the grid. And actually, one very interesting new studies that we are doing is on green hydrogen. So green hydrogen has the potential to sort of allow Nepal to export energy to everywhere in the world, right? Because once you have a green hydrogen, you no longer need the transmission line. So that could be a game changer. That said, before everyone rush out and buy green hydrogen stock, it's still early stages yet. So, but we see there's potential. That's why we are studying on it. Tourism, very important. And actually, I also can report to you that in our recent SASAC meeting, we agreed to sort of create a tourism working group, because we see so much potential for tourism in the region. There's potential for religious pilgrimage kind of tourism. There's potential for Buddhist circuits. There's so much to learn from each other. And of course, the main thing about tourism is that the Buddhist site, for example, right? They are located in Nepal. They are located in Bhutan. They are located in India. So tourists generally want to visit all of them. And currently, it's not so easy for tourists outside the region to travel across this country. There are visa regulations and so on. So what we are trying to do in this working group is find ways that we can help facilitate sort of movement, because tourists, they come, they don't want to go through different things. So we want to sort of bring them and sort of create this sort of regional cooperation in the tourism sector as well. And manufacturing. Time to wrap up. And maybe I'll just wrap up talking about the red tape. We were working very hard on that. You mentioned about Benapo and Petrapo. You'll be happy to know that we just did a policy loan for Bangladesh to improve the custom procedure. So hopefully your next visit, things are much smoother there. And also in Nepal, we are also working with the government to improve. So I was actually meeting with the custom secretary yesterday, and hopefully we can sort of improve the border process. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Thiam. So you have rightly mentioned that the opportunities are lies with the tourism, energy, and the manufacturing. Now moving to tourism sector, Ms. Nandini Thapa. I'll be going on the Nepal is blessed with many tourist destinations and the attraction. And the Nepal and its religious places are fed to around 1.1 billion people, especially Hindu and notably from India. The government has been working on to develop the required infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure like airport, road, even the government of Nepal already completed Gautam Buddha International Airport, and also in the verge of completion, Pokhara is near to completion, and even for the national highway, even government is planning to upgrade to 2-lane highway to 4-lane highway. So all the infrastructure required the people connectivity. And the tourism is one of the sector that increase the connectivity utilization of those infrastructures. So in this context, or unless the connectivity infrastructure is not utilized for trade, services, people and knowledge, it become a white elephant. So in this context, how Nepal Tourism Board is working to enhance the tourism connectivity, what are the major issues, and the most importantly, how can these be resolved in creating tourism connectivity for economic growth of Nepal?
Thank you so much. Honorable Chair, Honorable Minister of Culture, Tourism and Civil Aviation, my distinguished panelists, and the moderator and the audience. First of all, I really want to thank CNI and the organizers for including, this is literally the first time, tourism in an infrastructure conclave. And I think, where you have big topics like energy, you have infrastructure, you have power. And for the tourism industry, this is the greatest validation that yes, tourism is one of the most important industries towards the development of Nepal. So thank you so much for that. It's rare that I'm in an audience which is basically non-tourism, so it's interesting. So hope it'll be either very interesting or very boring for you all. So bear with me. When we look at UN WTO figures and look at all the studies that World Bank, ADB has done, it is an established fact that tourism is one of the greatest employers and generators in the world, is one of the largest growing industries, and same is the case with Nepal. Tourism in Nepal is, we are pretty mature as the destination. It's been there for over 7 decades. And with the huge variety of culture, nature, and adventure products that we have in such a small geospace, I think that gives us a very competitive and a comparative advantage over other destinations. We have been doing pretty well year on year, and then came the big bad COVID. And just like the rest of the world, we've also suffered. But now it seems that the worst is over. And numbers are slowly growing up. Interestingly, again, like one of your topic is connectivity. So the numbers have recovered the biggest from our neighbor India. China is still closed, otherwise we would have had good numbers from there. So the government, the travel trade industry and the tourism board, we are working very hard at rebooting and reviving tourism. Again, focusing on the topic today, which is economic prosperity and regional connectivity. With tourism, we talk about the 5 A's of tourism, which is basically attraction, it is accessibility, it is amenities, it is the activities and accommodation. Very connected to why we are all here today is accessibility, amenities, and activities that we have to offer to a potential tourist. Tourism in the trade sector is really sort of considered an export industry, but it is an in-situ export where the consumer comes to where the product is. So that's why the benefit to the country, and especially down the entire tourism value chain, especially in Nepal with a lot of forward and backward linkages, is totally undeniable. And a lot of focus has been given, thankfully now, by the ADB, the World Bank, and all our big donor organizations to take Nepal's tourism to the next level. So where we are really sort of falling back despite our huge attractions everywhere in every province is very smooth accessibility, complicated frontier formalities, a lot of trouble in doing ease of business if there are new investors coming in. So, and then again for the tourist visiting Nepal, we really need to ramp up on the infrastructure, and that's where you all come in. Okay, we need better roads, we need better air accessibility, better connectivity, and like I said earlier, simpler frontier formalities, and tourist standard hotels, restaurants, pit stops, toilets along the route, and a huge diversification of the tourism products and activities and attractions that we are offering. Because if you look at numbers, going by sheer numbers, there was a study done in 2017-18 about Indian visitor arrivals by land. It was a staggering figure of 1.4 million, okay? And they were staying for about 4.72 days, and spending about $45 per day, which is almost average to buy an air arrival. But then, that's Indian arrivals, but then again we look at visitors coming in from Sri Lanka, from Bangladesh, and they are basically day visitors. We have visitors coming on the Buddhist circuit, so they just come visit Lumbini and go back. Why? Is it that they don't want to stay? It's basically, I think, because they don't have anything much more to do. And that's where the onus of the government and the entire private sector and investors like you all, I think we really need to diversify what we have to offer. And again, domestic tourism has really increased in the post-COVID levels. It was domestic tourism that really kept the coffers going on. And there are a lot of new destinations coming in. The government has really invested and has plans to invest more in better accessibility. And where there are roads, where there are flights going in, the travel trade operators are definitely going to come up with new hotels, with new activities, with new infrastructure, which is already happening in very far-flung areas. So that's why, like I said, the accessibility, the amenities, and the activities are very closely linked together in sort of expanding in Nepal's tourism to the next level. So that's talking more about, and of course we are sort of sandwiched between two superpowers, so I would not really say that we are we are sort of landlocked. I would rather say that we are land linked. We have huge potential just looking at the neighboring destinations. Then looking further at the ASEAN destinations, the Buddhist markets. So, I mean, there is so much we can do. Very interestingly, if you really look at the arrival figures of certain countries like in ASEAN or in the Middle East, especially Dubai or Western Europe, you see staggering number of visitor arrivals. And but when we look at have a closer look at the demographics, it's all regional arrivals. It's people from Thailand going to Malaysia, people from Malaysia going to Vietnam. So that makes the bulk of the visitor arrivals. And why is that happening? Because they have fantastic air, land, and water connectivity. So I think it all really boils down to having this roadmap of good connectivity by all, and that is what we need to focus on. Another point I would like to also emphasize, especially when we are looking at reviving tourism. Now we have the Gautama Buddha Airport, we have the Pokhara International Airport coming, so, and we really need to now ramp up our connections and also make B2B agreements with the Buddhist, with the Buddhist markets, with India, with China, with Sri Lanka. I mean, all the Korea, all the potential markets to actually, sort of move. I would say, make GIA the hub for all these markets, and also Pokhara International Airport eventually, so that there is airspace sort of freed up at the very super saturated TIA for the longer haul travelers. And again, we spoke about regional tourism and looking at the regional markets, but also now I think especially when we are looking at sort of recovering in every aspect of business, whether it's tourism or trade, I think it's not the time for competition in the region. It is more a time for co-optation where we not only market our products within the region, but also go in for joint marketing in the long haul markets. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the speakers have been talking about the BBIN MVA, the Motor Vehicle Agreement. But for a decade and a half, I was also involved in the project where the UNDP sponsored a project of BBIN of the Buddhist circuit, where Bhutan, India, Bangladesh and Nepal. So we all created common collaterals, we had common packages, and they sort of facilitated us to participate in the larger fairs. So the Nepal pavilion had brochures which actually sold packages around these 4 countries. The same thing was by India, by Bhutan, and that worked very well at that time, but then with overtime, of course, it went out. But I think it is high time that we again sort of regenerate all the great ideas we had, a couple of years back. It's time to revive ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandini ji. So I'd like to move on to energy sector, the most interesting sector because of the recent energy trading and opening the door to regional market of the energy, and the Nepal Electricity Authority has been exporting energy, and that quantum also increasing day by day, and hopefully in the near future the energy trading itself will increase the gap of the regional trade. So in this context, I'd like to move on to Kulman sir, and I do have a particular question on the basically Bangladesh is interested to import roughly around 9,000 megawatt. They have already put in their policy paper, and India also focusing on the hydropower sector and the compulsorily increasing hydropower contribution to their energy mix, and the compulsorily provision of the hydropower purchase obligation. In this context, India and the Bangladesh itself is a very bigger market. By 2030, even India needs another 18,000 megawatt of the hydropower for their energy mix. In this context, how do you see the regional integration of the energy trading and the development of transmission connectivity and the chance of the real power evacuation from Nepal to Bangladesh, whereby India's full support is needed politically as well as operationally? Over to you, Kulman sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just point out two important aspects. First one is transmission connectivity, and second one is market integration within this BBIN framework. At present, we have around 7 132 kV transmission connectivity between India and Nepal, and 400 kV transmission line double circuit. So total capacity of transmission wheeling capacity is around 2,000 megawatt at present. And within 6 to 1 year, one 400 kV transmission line, double circuit transmission line will be completed by Surplus, and another 132 kV transmission line will be completed by ourselves, and that will add around to 2,500 megawatts. So within 1 year, our transmission, cross-border transmission capacity will be 4,500 megawatt. And we have already studied, detailed design was already completed. Our joint steering committee has already approved Lamki Bareilly and Dobi Purnia transmission line, 400 kV. And the scheduled completion date is around 2027. And one transmission line is already under implementation, Bhutan Gorakhpur. Bidding has been already started, and it will be completed within 2025. So by 2025, our capacity of transmission line will be for 7,000 megawatt, and by 2027, our transmission capacity will be around 13,000 megawatt. That is already unplanned and under different stages of implementation. So transmission connectivity between India and Nepal is, I think, at advanced stage. If we see transmission connectivity between India and Bangladesh, Still it is around 1100 or 1200 megawatt. They are trying to build 7,500 megawatt, 765 kV transmission line between them. So this will help Nepal to export its hydropower to India or Bangladesh. And we are trying to build a transmission corridor between Bangladesh and Nepal also. Maybe it may be different modality. Power Grid may be involved in constructing those transmission line with tariff-based transmission line construction. So last month only, we had a meeting with Bangladesh secretary level meeting, and we have already concluded to trade with Bangladesh and Nepal with trilateral agreement with BPDB, Nepal Electricity Authority, and ENBVN of India. So that process is going on. We have already working on this line. So that will, I think, realize in very short time period. In market integration also, I think last 1 year's development is very encouraging. We have access to Indian exchange market. Bilateral trading we have been doing for long years. I think this trading between Nepal and India, bilateral, this exchange market trading, day-ahead market, every day we are trading up to 400, 500 megawatt export. Nepal is exporting now. So that exchange market we have access. So, and in coming future, within next 2-3 months, we will be getting this real-time market and term ahead market. So all types of market, Indian market, Nepal will be getting access. So that will be very good to trade between Nepal and India. So Nepal now is exporting electricity, hydropower, green energy to India through exchange market. Every day around 400 megawatt up to, I think, November end we'll be exporting. And dry season 4 months, we may have to import also around 200 to 300 megawatt. That will remain for next 1 year or 2 years. So this market integration is also going on at some policy harmonization process. I think we are discussing on that line also. After our Prime Minister's visit in India, joint vision statement was issued that time. I think that joint vision statement has already stated three important aspects. First thing is access to market by both the countries in both the all types of market. We can get access to by Nepal in India and Nepal, India to Nepal also, both sides. Bilateral flow of electricity is already there. And next one is transmission connectivity. Joint venture transmission connectivity is already we have started. And third one is this joint development of hydropower. So on that framework, I think some hydropower projects have already been taken up by joint development with Nepal Electricity Authority and Satluj. And that market integration will be extended up to BVIN. That was explicitly mentioned in that joint vision statement. So that joint vision statement will become the milestone for the next upcoming time frame. So I think I am very much hopeful that Nepal, India, and Bangladesh market will be vibrant in coming future. Thank you.
Thank you, Gulman sir. So moving to again energy integration and the connectivity. So transmission infrastructure is one of the major requirement for the regional connectivity of the energy, and the MCC is working on one larger project, and also doing the kind of the policy lobby with the Indian counterpart to have the real integration of the power and real evacuation of power from Nepal. In this context, how will the MCC contribute to energy integration and connectivity in the coming years? Over to you, sir.
Sorry. Good morning. First of all, I appreciate CNI for inviting me. I think from the beginning, CNI started Infrastructure Summit. You know, I was always invited, so it's a good homecoming. Thank you very much for this. Honorable Minister and colleagues in the panel, audiences, you know, when somebody has spoken about what you are trying to speak, you become irrelevant. But anyway, I will just highlight some of the things that my project is doing or my program is doing. Before that, we heard about, you know, how does regional connectivity, you know, brings economic growth, and how does, you know, it brings a better communication with the, you know, each country with the other country. But you know, we heard about Southeast Asia, especially, which has, you know, the large volume of trade is going through regional trade. The countries have really progressed, you know, tremendous progress, high GDP rate. But with that GDP rate, you know, that high growth has also, there's a darker side of that. You know, there are distribution disparity among the countries. There are difficulties among nation to nation. That I will talk at the last, but mostly I will focus on what project we are currently doing. MCC is a US organization, Millennium Challenge Corporation, which does grant in a large infrastructure project. Nepal was chosen already in 2014. A contract is called Compact here. Compact is a grant agreement that was signed in 2017 for $500 million grant to government of Nepal, and government of Nepal contributes $130 million. So in total, $630 million. It has two components in it. The larger portion, around 90% of the budget, goes for a transmission line, starting from north of Kathmandu, Lapsifedi, all the way to Nepal-India border near Butwal. It's a 315-kilometer transmission line. It's a pretty long transmission line, high capacity, you know. It can carry as high as 3,500 megawatt. You know, and you know, we do have a implementation plan now ready. You know, we ran into difficulty for last 2-3 years, but now finally, you know, we are starting it. Probably during November, we will do a bidding of this transmission line. You know, it's an international bidding. Any competitor can bid, so there are no restrictions for any countries to participate. Contrary to what we hear in the market, you know, certain companies, certain nations are not allowed. I think that those countries where US has a sanction may not be allowed, but normally all nations are allowed. That's one thing. So we are building 3 large substations, one in Ratmate, Nuwakot, one in Butwal, and one in Damauli in Tanahu. Very large substation, about 1,000 MVA capacity. But we're connecting to 2 other substations. One is Lapsifedi and one to Hetaunda. So this transmission line will pull power from 3 large river basins and take it to all load centers of Nepal, and anything that is not consumed within Nepal can be transported to through a second cross-border line, which is Butwal to Gorakhpur transmission line, which is, as Kulbanji has already said, which is under bidding now, which is a great progress. So we'll be building only 18 kilometers of that section from the substation. And, you know, our plan is to start from next year, August. And the time starts for 5 years, and we have to complete within 5 years. MCC model says that if we're not able to complete it, you know, the money will go back to the US. So there's a pretty much tight schedule there. We have another, which is not a regional interconnection project, which there is another road maintenance project with a new technology, which is called full depth recycling technology. This will be first of its kind in Nepal, but that we are doing in the western part of Nepal. So on regional connectivity perspective, this may be a small brick in the whole building, but this is one of the largest projects that Nepal probably is building now. But having said this on regional connectivity, I don't know if I can put this question when I'm myself a panelist, but I wonder, when we talk about regional connectivity, what has happened lately is, due to the globalization, your domestic industries has hard time to compete with other industries. Look at those privatized 35, 36 state enterprises in Nepal, they didn't really take up. Because immediately when they were privatized to compete in the market, there was, globalization push. They had to compete against large Chinese industries, Indian industries. And Nepal was really not able to compete with them. How does this help Nepal itself? That's one, a question that, the policymakers and international institutions like World Bank, ADB has to find out an answer for this. And this is not only an issue of economy, it's bringing a lot of political discussion in the West, actually. The far-right parties are coming because their industries are not moving, their chimneys are without smoke. People are rebelling against the government that everything is imported and nothing is produced in this country, and the other people coming from other countries are taking the business. So this is some fundamental thing that when you talk about integration, we have to think about sustainability of that integration in your country. Is Nepal capable of competing on this? Energy may be a specific product that is easy to compete with, but talk about other industries. Are we able to compete? That's one thing. The last thing I would like to say, independence on resources or utilization versus interdependence. Look at the issue, the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine. 40% of the gas was supplied to Europe by Russia. The gas pipelines are closed for a few weeks now, and the people are really suffering. So how does this integration, this globalization, really, really help community? And what is globalization 2.0? I think that's the biggest question for the humanity, I would think. Although this is not in my work life, but I really wonder, can we solve this integration question? Can we solve this globalization question? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Kharga sir. So now moving to the private sector, Gyanendra sir is better known for the energy, and parallelly he has been working on the logistic infrastructure, especially he has been into the railway and the tourism business. So I'll be asking two questions to Gyanendra sir. How can we mobilize private sector investment and the participation in regional infrastructure connectivity project? And what are the investment opportunity you see and the gap for regional connectivity project? Over to you, Gyanendra sir.
Okay, thank you. Session Chair, Honorable Minister, fellow panelists. What I can see, actually, there are many connectivity, it's a road connectivity, air connectivity, people-to-people connectivity, or electricity connectivity. We have tried many. Motor vehicle, the connectivity we tried 7 years back, still not going forward. But after I hear to Kulmanji, we are working together. Things are moving so fast in energy connectivity. We are talking of many thousand megawatt, 7,000 megawatt, 10,000 megawatt, 15,000 megawatt. And the connectivity, I don't see big problem with the financing in connectivity, because mostly we have to connect to India and Bangladesh. We are trying to connect to China also, which will go a little bit slow, because neither we can buy power from China or neither we can sell to China. Our market is south. And this 20 trillion, let's say Chinese economy is second important, and the most important is the Indian economy, which is growing at 8, 9, 10% now, gradually. Same same with the speed of this Bangladesh, and that's demanding more power. I just compare sometimes China's energy consumption and India's energy consumption having the bigger growth rate in India than China, and almost same population. China is having almost 1.5 million megawatt. India is having just 0.3 billion megawatt. So in future, the demand for water, demand for clean energy will be much, much bigger. And if you don't go for the clean energy, India and Bangladesh need to go for the coal waste fire power plant. That's going to make this global warming much more worse in future. So right now, India got almost 4th or 5th position in the power pollution. India will be the 3rd power polluting country if they don't go for the green energy. So I don't see big problem. Things are moving perfectly in this thing. Many sectors not working in this country. But we are so hopeful. Past 40 years, we were shouting, exports, this, that. No? But naturally, Nepal need to look for internal consumption first. What I can see, I have calculated that Nepal consume in electrical terms more than 120,000 gigawatt hour from all the resources, from the firewood, from the petroleum products, from gas, from electricity. And electricity is supplying around 9,000 gigawatt. That's less than, let's say, 7%. When I did some study with the Brazil or Bhutan, I can see consuming 40,000 gigawatt hours is possible today. We imported 61 billion of gas last year, and we send all our hard-earned, let's say, blood money, we call dollar, US dollar, to India to buy all those gases. No? So I think things are changing. Kulmanji is working very hard. I'm also board member for the MCA. Khargaji is working very hard. So connectivity, I don't see big problem with the electricity. Now, I want to give you some probable good news. This is not declared between two countries. I heard that even this West City connectivity to, let's say, India, now moving forward from the Indian government soft loan of line of credit, that's a 1%, which Prime Minister Modi promised us. So everything is going perfectly in this direction. Now, I still remember during our Prime Minister visit to India, the BBIN was the focus. So I think we should more focus not on BIMSTEC for the energy or other SAARC. I think we should more focus on BBIN. Once the BBIN is successful, I'm dead sure the SAARC will come then come with the BIMSTEC. Gradually, all these regions will come together. So I think that should be the one. And I always tell the politician in India, I've been to BJP office more than 9 times. 5 times they invited me. I always tease them that I'm Nepali. If I come to Delhi also, I'm a Nepali. My vehicle in Nepali registered. If they're going to Delhi also, still Nepali registered. But why you give this political color to water and energy? The electron got no nationality, and the water got no nationality. Our Bagmati river going to India, then it became Indian river. Our electron from the, let's say, hydropower project going to India, it become power supply for the India. There's no nationality. So I think things are changing in India a lot, and I'm very hopeful power sector will go very strongly. And I give you the good news that in Northern Valley, 2,100 megawatt project, almost $2 billion already came inside. Such a huge investment never came inside Nepal in FDI. No? So many FDI we tried, but there are many other competitors, other countries in tourism, this, that, everywhere. But in power sector, they have to come to Nepal because the market is India and Bangladesh. And Bangladesh already declared 9,000 megawatt they want to buy by 2040. India solar project is going in such a big way. And more solar, I'm so happy there will be peak demand in the morning and evening and night. And that will create the huge problem in Indian energy supply system. Right now, if they open up the energy price in India, it may reach 40 Indian rupees from 5 to 11 p.m. That will be the highest price in this region, though. So it's almost impossible. So that's a huge opportunity. And thanks to Prime Minister Modi, our Prime Minister requested, he just brought 1,200 megawatt. Thanks to Bangladesh government, even the private sector, CNI is working very hard with the Bangladesh connection, that why not to bring private sector more? Now our focus in CNI is that why only G2G? why only government agencies coming to Nepal? Okay, let them go forward with some 1,000 megawatt, 10,000 megawatt. But we need more private sector from India. We need more private sector from this thing. And I think CNI vision for this Make in India, one of the biggest, our focus is the electricity trade. And things are happening, the FDI is coming. Now the biggest problem, since we have a friend from World Bank, we know each other, financing is the biggest problem for the private sector. No finances are available in Nepalese bank, the liquidity crunch. So I think all these big agencies like World Bank, ADB, they need to help government to finance even the private banks for the certain sectors. And all these sectors giving lots of value addition. I just give one last line. I give one example. We have so much FDI. I told our friend from World Bank that this FDI demanding so much foreign currency for raw material. That's creating problem to us now. We need that in the first stage. But now look at the Arun tree. We almost got $2 billion. After we complete, the raw material foreign currency requirement will be 0. The valuation will be 95%. And as Kulmanji already declared, this year, most probably he planned to export 16 billion. Next year, if we complete Arun tree, it will add another 30 billion. So it will be almost 50 billion exports. So everything is moving so fast, and government need to visualize the export potential in the next 5 to 10 years. That's going to change it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gyanendra sir. So we are running out of the time, so I'll be requesting our keynote speaker and the special remark speaker, especially on changing dynamics of the SAARC to BMSTEC and the BBIN energy framework, BBIN motor vehicle agreement. India is the main actor. So in this context, do you see the effectiveness and the relevance of the regional mechanism like SAARC, BMSTEC and the BBIN, and how Nepal can leverage these mechanisms? So first over to Cecil, then I'll go to Rajat, sir. So I'll request to conclude in 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. So this is a region that unfortunately does not have very strong regional organizations. However, we do see on BIMSTEC there's renewed momentum. The charter was finally adopted. ADB's been supporting them very much also on a connectivity master plan. So we think that BIMSTEC is an organization worth investing in and watching very carefully. Where we approach this is we look very much at where there are economic win-wins, and we've spoken about it, right? We've spoken about transport, electricity, tourism. In this sub-region, BBIN, there is no formal BBIN secretariat or institution, but we don't need it to advance in all of these areas. Through bilateral relations and then crowding in, trilateral. Many have mentioned the important role of India, but also of Bangladesh. As these markets develop on the transport side, on the energy side, on tourism, you don't need a regional institution to make this happen. You need governments to agree to sign, vision statements, MOUs, agreements. You need a policy objective. You need then implementation of that policy, and you need to crowd in the private sector and financiers, obviously. So that's our vision. We can advance on this agenda without having the regional institutions necessarily in place to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to echo what Cecilia said, I draw a lot of hope and inspiration from an experience in Southeast Asia, something called the Greater Mekong Sub-Region, something that, again, Bindu and I were involved right from the beginning. Those countries were literally at war. The so-called Indochina War had not even finished, and yet they got together because they saw that the cooperation pays. And one fundamental principle was that we don't have to all agree. Consensus was not necessary, the so-called N+1. So the members were Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar, and also Yunnan province of China. Any two countries could agree to do something and do it. It's nobody else's business. This formula I think makes a lot of sense. SAARC, I think, got unfortunately moribund because India and Pakistan couldn't agree. But there were things that India and Nepal could agree, or Pakistan and Nepal could agree. And that is the model that SASIC is following, that is the model that BBIN is following. So I think regional cooperation should be an enabler, not a constraint. And there will always be political differences. We have to be realistic. Countries will have their own national priorities, which should not hold the region hostage. And therefore, I think SASIC was born out of this feeling. BBIN, Bhutan dropped out for domestic political reasons, fine. Let the other three go ahead. So my plea is, don't throw the baby out with the bath, because regional cooperation is a win-win proposition, not equal, but everybody cannot and must not be forced to agree.
Yes, thank you very much, Raja sir. So we have concluded our panel discussion, and thank you very much all the panelists and the keynote speaker and the special remarks for wonderful deliberation and the wonderful remarks on the given question. So I'd like to request Honorable Minister for Culture, Tourism, Civil Aviation for closing remarks and the wrap of the session. Over to you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you. नमस्कार यो आजको यस यो प्यानलमा रहनुभएका अतिथि महानुभावहरू यस नेपाल इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर समिटका आयोजक संस्था र उपस्थित सम्पूर्ण सहभागी महानुभावहरू र पत्रकार मित्रहरू यो कोभिड पछिको जुन खालको अवस्था छ र यो अवस्थामा यो नेपाल इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर समिटको जुन आयोजना भएको छ यो निकै नै एउटा महत्त्वपूर्ण काम भएको छ। त्यसको लागि म आयोजक संस्था CNI-लाई हार्दिक धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु। निश्चित रूपमा यो इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चरको विकास बिना हामीले आर्थिक वृद्धिका कुराहरू परिकल्पना गर्न सक्दैनौँ र विश्वव्यापी रूपमा आएको जुन कोभिडको पेन्डेमिक छ त्यसले सबै देश र समाजलाई र विकासलाई असर पार्ने काम भएको छ र नेपालमा पनि त्यसले चाहिँ नि ठुलो असर पार्ने काम भयो र हामीले इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर क्षेत्रमा जुन चाहिँ नि राखेका बजेटहरू पनि यो मानवीय कामको लागि र पेन्डेमिकबाट मुक्त गर्नको लागि त्यता लगानी गर्नुपर्ने एउटा अवस्था सिर्जना भयो, जसले गर्दा यो इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेभलपमेन्टको सेक्टरको काममा पछाडि परेको अवस्था चाहिँ नि रहन गएको छ। र आज यो जुन समिटमा यहाँ मुख्य जुन चाहिँ नि वक्ता र अरू सेक्टरको हाम्रो वर्ल्ड ब्याङ्क, एडिबी र हाम्रा विभिन्न अर्गनाइजेसनको तर्फबाट यहाँ जुन कुराहरू राख्नुभएको छ र महत्त्वपूर्ण कुराहरू उठेका छन् र अब यो हाम्रो जुन चाहिँ नि कनेक्टिभिटीका कुराहरू छन् यो बिना हामीले चाहिँ नि विकासको गतिमा अगाडि बढ्न सक्दैनौँ र हाम्रो देशले जुन आर्थिक जुन चाहिँ नि विकासको आधारको रूपमा हाम्रो जुन कृषि, जलस्रोत र चाहिँ नि पर्यटनलाई हामीले लिएका छौँ, यो क्षेत्रको विकासको लागि पनि हामीलाई यो कनेक्टिभिटीहरूको आवश्यकता पर्छ। त्यसैले त्यो सडकको कुरा होस्, चाहे त्यो चाहिँ नि जलमार्गका कुराहरू होस्, चाहे त्यो हवाई मार्गका कुराहरू होस्, चाहे त्यो रेल मार्गका कुराहरू होस्, यो सबै कुराहरूको चाहिँ नि कनेक्टिभिटीले मात्र हामीले यो क्षेत्रको विकासका कामहरूलाई अगाडि बढाउन सक्छौँ र नेपालको आर्थिक वृद्धि दरलाई हामी चाहिँ नि बढाउन सक्छौँ। र सँगै अहिलेको अब जुन यो विश्वको चाहिँ नि अहिले अवस्था छ र यसमा एउटा मात्र देशको विकासले अब हामीले चाहिँ नि जुन खालको एउटा समाजको जुन उन्नतिका कुराहरू गरिरहेका छौँ, जुन एउटा ग्लोबल कन्टेक्स्टमा हामीले एउटा चाहिँ नि सबैलाई आर्थिक रूपले चाहिँ नि माथि उठाउने जुन चाहिँ नि अवधारणामा अगाडि बढिरहेका छौँ, यसको लागि हाम्रो अब यो रिजनल जुन चाहिँ नि देशहरू बिचमा नै एउटा सौहार्दपूर्ण ढङ्गबाट यो विकासका कुराहरूलाई अगाडि बढाउनु पर्ने आवश्यकता चाहिँ नि छ र यो कनेक्टिभिटीहरूलाई चाहिँ नि हामीले चाहिँ नि अगाडि बढाउनु पर्ने आवश्यकताहरू छ र यसले एउटा देशको मात्र चाहिँ नि विकासले त्यो सबै कुराहरू चाहिँ नि अगाडि बढ्न सक्छ भन्ने भन्दा पनि सँगैसँगैका चाहिँ नि देशहरू विकासमा अगाडि बढ्न सक्यो भने त्यसले अझ आर्थिक वृद्धि दरलाई चाहिँ नि बढाउने कामहरू हुन सक्छ। यतातर्फ अब हामी सबैको चाहिँ नि ध्यान जानुपर्ने आवश्यकता मैले चाहिँ नि देखेको छु र सँगै यो अब हाम्रो देशकै चाहिँ नि सन्दर्भमा पनि हामीलाई अब एउटा रिजनल को चाहिँ नि कनेक्टिभिटीका कुराहरू छन् भने अर्को भनेको हाम्रो आन्तरिक कनेक्टिभिटीको पनि त्यत्तिकै एउटा चाहिँ नि आवश्यकता रहेको छ। हाम्रा चाहिँ नि अब यो पर्यटकीय हिसाबले कुरा गर्ने हो भने पनि हाम्रा चाहिँ नि जुन खालका ठाउँहरू जो पर्यटकीय हिसाबले गन्तव्यको रूपमा रहेका सुन्दर चाहिँ नि ठाउँहरू छन्। अब जस्तै हामीले भनौँ यहाँ यो हाम्रो सुदूरपश्चिममा जाने हो भने हाम्रो त्यहाँको चाहिँ नि जुन खप्टर जस्ता ठाउँहरू जो एउटा चाहिँ नि तपस्वीहरूको ठाउँ स्पिरिचुअल हिसाबले निकै नै एउटा महत्त्वपूर्ण ठाउँ हो र त्यस्तै गरिकन त्यो प्राकृतिक हिसाबले पनि त्यत्तिकै महत्त्वपूर्ण ठाउँ हो। अब त्यहाँ हामीलाई चाहिँ नि इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चरको चाहिँ नि अभावको कारणले पर्यटकहरू सजिलोसँग जान आउन सक्ने अवस्था बनिरहेको छैन। त्यस्तै गरिकन हामीले अब चाहिँ नि जो एउटा चाहिँ नि यो पेलिग्रिम्सहरू जसले मानसरोवर चाहिँ नि हेर्न चाहन्छ त्यहाँ चाहिँ नि आफ्नो एउटा जुन धार्मिक रूपले चाहिँ नि आस्था राख्छ त्यो जो सिधा चाहिँ नि मानसरोवर जान नसक्ने अवस्थामा हाम्रो हुम्लाको ठाउँ छ जहाँबाट मानसरोवरलाई सिधा चाहिँ नि देख्न सक्छ हेर्न सक्छ। तर हाम्रो त्यहाँको चाहिँ नि सडक सञ्जालको अभावको कारणले त्यहाँका इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चरहरूको अभावको कारणले हाम्रा पर्यटकहरू त्यहाँ चाहिँ नि सजिलोसँग जान सक्ने अवस्था बनिरहेको छैन। त्यस्तै गरिकन तपाईँको अब राराको कुरा गर्ने हो भने पनि त्यति सुन्दर ताल हामीसँग छ। डोल्पाको तपाईँको फोक्सोन्दोको कुरा गर्ने हो भने त्यति सुन्दर ताल हामीसँग छ। जो कोही पनि एकपल्ट त्यो रारा तालमा त्यो चाहिँ नि से फोक्सोन्दोमा पुग्ने हो भने मन्त्रमुग्ध हुने अवस्था चाहिँ नि छ। तर हाम्रो समस्या चाहिँ नि त्यहाँको यो सडक सञ्जालको चाहिँ नि समस्या छ। त्यहाँ राम्रो सडक चाहिँ नि को अवस्था छैन। त्यहाँ बस्ने जुन चाहिँ नि एउटा इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चरहरूको चाहिँ नि त्यहाँ सुविधाहरू छैन जसले गर्दा पर्यटकहरू त्यहाँ गएर चाहिँ नि बस्ने र दिन बिताउने अवस्थाहरू सहज ढङ्गबाट बन्न सकिरहेका छैन। र यो लगायतका धेरै ठाउँहरू नेपालमा छन् जुन ठाउँहरूमा हाम्रो चाहिँ नि कनेक्टिभिटीको राम्रो व्यवस्था नभएको हुनाले पर्यटकहरू जाने आउने कुराहरूमा त्यसले सहजता हुन सकिरहेको छैन र त्यसले पर्यटनको चाहिँ नि एउटा सङ्ख्यामा उल्लेखनीय मात्रामा अभिवृद्धि गर्ने कुरामा हामीले चाहिँ नि सफलता प्राप्त गर्न सकिरहेका छैनौँ। त्यसो भएको हुनाले अहिले सरकार यो कनेक्टिभिटीको चाहिँ नि क्षेत्रलाई सुदृढ गर्ने कुरामा प्रतिबद्ध छ। त्यसको लागि लगानी बढाउने कुराहरूमा लागिरहेको अवस्थाहरू पनि छ र हाम्रो हवाई सञ्जालको हिसाबले भन्ने हो भने अहिले 40वटा देशसँग हाम्रो हवाई चाहिँ नि सम्झौता छ र त्यस्तै गरिकन अहिले हाम्रो चाहिँ नि अमेरिकासँग अनि अर्को भनेको रुससँग लगायतका अरू देशहरूसँग पनि डाइरेक्ट एउटा चाहिँ नि जुन कनेक्टिभिटीको लागि त्यो चाहिँ नि सम्झौताका प्रक्रियाहरू अगाडि बढिरहेको अवस्थाहरू पनि छन्। अब हाम्रो एकतिरबाट हामी चाहिँ नि जुन भूपरिवेष्टित देशको रूपमा रहेका छौँ ल्यान्डलक जुन छ भुटानको पनि त्यही अवस्था छ। अर्को तर्फबाट आकाश पनि हाम्रो सीमित मात्र हामीले एउटा चाहिँ नि प्रयोग गर्ने अवस्था बनेको छ। नेपालमा प्रवेश गर्ने एउटा मात्र अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय जुन उडानहरू छ त्यो एउटा बिन्दुबाट मात्र प्रवेश गर्न पाउँछ। अर्कोबाट हाम्रा चाहिँ नि प्रवेश गर्ने बिन्दु चाहिँ नि भएको छैन। यसमा हाम्रो प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर भनेको अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय फ्लाइटको लागि महेन्द्रनगर नेपालगञ्ज र भैरवालाई हामीले चाहिँ नि जुन अगाडि बढाइरहेको छु र यसको अब भारत सरकारसँग हाम्रो कुराकानीहरू भइरहेको छ तर त्यो खुलिसकेको अवस्था छैन। र सँगै अब चाहिँ नि अघि यहाँ जुन खालका कतिपय पर्यटनसँग जोडेका कुराहरूमा हाम्रो नेपाल टुरिज्म बोर्डको प्रतिनिधिले यहाँ राखिसक्नु भएको अवस्था पनि छ। हाम्रो अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय जुन विमानस्थलहरू हामीले चाहिँ नि सुरु गरेका छौँ यसलाई सुदृढ गर्नेतर्फ हामी गइरहेका छौँ र यसरी एउटा चाहिँ नि नेपालको पर्यटन क्षेत्रलाई सुदृढ गर्नको लागि र यसलाई चाहिँ नि हामीले अब नेपाल पर्यटकहरूको चाहिँ नि 12 महिना आउन सक्ने एउटा देश हो भनेर हामीले अगाडि बढाइरहेका छौँ। राउन्ड द इयर डेस्टिनेसन नेपाल चाहिँ नि राउन्ड द इयर टुरिस्ट डेस्टिनेसन भनेर हामीले एउटा अभियान सुरु गर्दैछौँ। नेपालको जुन खालको एउटा हावापानी, यहाँको चाहिँ नि वातावरण र यहाँको चाहिँ नि जुन सबै खालका चाहिँ नि अवस्थाहरूबाट 12 महिना पर्यटकहरू नेपाल घुम्न आउन सक्ने अवस्था छ र घुम्ने ठाउँहरू छ र हामीले पर्यटन क्षेत्रलाई पनि एउटा इन्क्लुसिभनेसको पोलिसीबाट अगाडि बढाउन खोजिरहेका छौँ। यो हिसाबले नेपालको पर्यटन क्षेत्रको विकासको लागि अहिले नेपाल सरकार अगाडि बढिरहेको चाहिँ नि अवस्था छ र यो जुन चाहिँ नि आज यो इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर समिटमा जति कुराहरू चाहिँ नि यहाँ भइरहेको छ, यसले निश्चित रूपमा हाम्रो नेपालको इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चरको यो जुन अभाव भइरहेका ठाउँहरूमा विकास गर्ने कुरामा यसले थप टेवा पुग्नेछ भन्ने विश्वास चाहिँ नि मैले लिइरहेको छु र हाम्रो जुन यो विकासको क्षेत्रमा यो एडिबीको तर्फबाट र वर्ल्ड ब्याङ्कको तर्फबाट जुन लगानीहरू भइरहेका छन्, जुन सहयोगहरू भइरहेको छ, त्यसको लागि म सरकारको तर्फबाट धन्यवाद पनि दिन चाहन्छु। हाम्रा यी थप सेक्टरहरूमा जुन खालको कनेक्टिभिटीको क्षेत्रमा रिजनल हिसाबले नै एक खालको सहकार्यको आवश्यकताहरू पर्छ। त्यसैले मलाई लाग्छ अहिलेको चाहिँ नि जुन समयमा हाम्रा यो फिजिकल कनेक्टिभिटीका कुराहरू चाहिँ नि जुन आवश्यक छन् र त्यसको सँगसँगै हाम्रो भावनात्मक कनेक्टिभिटीको पनि एकदमै चाहिँ नि आवश्यकता देखिरहेको छु कि एक देश र अर्को देशको चाहिँ नि विकासमा सहयोग पुर्याउने कुराहरू र त्यसलाई मद्दत गर्ने कुराहरू र सँगसँगै चाहिँ नि आर्थिक रूपले माथि उठ्ने कुराहरूमा हाम्रो चाहिँ नि सोचाइ हुनुपर्छ र त्यो खालको एउटा चाहिँ नि नीति हुनुपर्छ र त्यसो भयो भने हामीले जुन खालको विश्वमा गरिबीलाई चाहिँ नि न्यूनीकरण गर्ने, उन्मूलन गर्ने जुन खालको एउटा चाहिँ नि अभियान अहिले चाहिँ नि चलिरहेको अवस्था छ, त्यसमा हामीले सफलता पाउन सक्छौँ भन्ने विश्वाससहित आज यहाँ जुन चाहिँ नि आफ्नो मन्तव्य राख्नुहुने सम्पूर्ण गेस्टहरूलाई म हार्दिक धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु। सँगै यो महत्त्वपूर्ण यो चाहिँ नि नेपाल इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर समिट 2022 को आयोजना गर्नुभएकोमा सिएनआईलाई हार्दिक धन्यवाद ज्ञापन गर्दै मलाई यो अवसर दिनुभएकोमा पनि धन्यवाद ज्ञापन गर्छु र आफ्नो भनाइ टुङ्ग्याउँछु। धन्यवाद, नमस्कार।
धन्यवाद माननीय मन्त्रीज्यू। लन्चको अगाडि हामी केही समय ढिला हुन गयौँ, त्यसको लागि हामी क्षमा प्रार्थी छौँ। ओभर टु यू सध्यक्षजी।
Thank you to our chair, our keynote speakers, our panelists, and our moderator for this insightful, engaging discussion on the topic regional connectivity. Now, connectivity might also mean that you have breakfast at Everest, a delicious lunch in Delhi, and might end the night with an amazing view of Thimphu. It might mean that your cargo arrives on time. It might also mean more trade, more business, more money, more vacation, more memories, more electricity, more light. Connectivity is key when it comes to countries and regions tapping into their full potential. And what a fabulous session this was. Expressing our gratitude to all the distinguished personalities on stage, I would now like to invite Mr. Krishna Prasad Adhikari, Vice President CNI, to kindly join us on stage to present this token of appreciation. We'd like to thank our chair, Honorable Minister, Mr. Jeevan Ram Shrestha, Minister for Culture, Tourism and Civil Aviation, Government of Nepal. माननीय मन्त्रीज्यूलाई धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद। नेपाल इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर समिट 2022 को यो सेसनमा आइदिएर आफ्नो बहुमूल्य समय दिनुभएकोमा। We'd also like to thank our keynote speaker, Mr. Rajat Nag. Thank you very much, sir, for adding so much insight into this wonderful session today. We'd also like to thank our keynote speaker, Ms. Cecile Fruman. Can we have a big round of applause? अलिकति लोभी नभइकन सबैजनाले मजाले ताली बजाउनु पर्यो जस्तो छ हाम्रो प्यानलिस्टहरुको लागि पनि. We'd like to also thank Dr. Thiam Hee Ung. Thank you very much for being a part of this discussion. We'd also like to thank Ms. Nandini Thapa. Thank you very much for adding insights in regards to tourism. Mr. Gyanendra Lal Pradhan. We'd also like to express our gratitudes towards Mr. Kulman Ghising, Managing Director, Nepal Electricity Authority. As well as Mr. Khaga Bahadur Bisht, Executive Director at Millennium Challenge Account, Nepal. And a huge thank you to our moderator of this session, Mr. Ram Krishna Khatiwada, CEO, Nepal Infrastructure Bank Limited. A group picture now of this panelists or this panel, the second business session. We would like to take a group photo. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you fueled your mind a lot. Now it's time to fuel your bellies as well. So we'll break for lunch for about 30 minutes, and I hope and a humble request for everyone to kindly be back. We're running late on the schedule. So 30 minutes, and we'd like to request everyone to kindly be back so that we can start with our third business session for today at Nepal Infrastructure Summit 2022. यहाँहरु सबैजनालाई अबको आधी घण्टामा हलभित्र आइदिनु हुनको लागि अनुरोध गर्न चाहन्छौँ किनभने यहाँहरुको आगमन सँगसँगै हामीले हाम्रो थर्ड बिजनेस सेसन पनि सुरु गर्नेछौँ।